The mansion was far too silent for a house with 4 3.5-year-old children. Diego stopped at the door of the girl's bedroom and felt the familiar weight tighten his chest. There they were again, Isabel, Cecilia, Amanda, and Livia, sitting on the floor, motionless like porcelain statues. None of them played. None of them spoke. They only stared into nothingness with those empty eyes that haunted him every night. It had been 1 year and 2 months since Mariana had left. She didn't die, didn't have an accident. She simply left a letter on the kitchen table and disappeared, unable to bear the motherhood that suffocated her. Diego remembered every word of that letter, especially the last line, "I can't be what they need." The girls changed that day. It was as if someone had turned off the light inside them. They stopped running through the house, stopped asking for bedtime stories, stopped fighting over toys. They merely existed, drifting in a silence that screamed louder than any cry. Diego tried everything. He hired the best nannies in the country, took the little ones to 5 different psychologists, bought mountains of expensive toys that remained untouched in the corners. Nothing worked. The specialists spoke of abandonment trauma, emotional blockage, need for time. But how much time? How long until his daughters would be children again? Exhausted and desperate, he gave up trying to fix what seemed irreparable. He dismissed the entire staff and decided to hire only someone to keep the house clean. Nothing more. Nothing that would invade the fragile space that remained. That was when Teresa appeared. A black woman in her early 30s, kind eyes and calloused hands of someone who knew hard work. She came with a 6-year-old girl clinging to her skirt, shy and silent. Teresa desperately needed the job, and Diego desperately needed help. Neither of them imagined what was about to happen. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Leave a comment saying what you thought and which city or country you're watching from. His girls were about to do something no one expected. Teresa started the next day. Diego made it clear, she was there only to clean. She didn't need to interact with the girls, didn't need to try anything. He had already given up on miracles. In the first few days, Teresa followed the agreement exactly. She cleaned in silence, prepared simple meals, kept a respectful distance. But there was something different about her. While the other nannies tried to force smiles and games, Teresa simply existed in the same space as the girls, without expectations, without pressure. When she passed through the living room where they remained seated, she didn't pretend everything was fine. She didn't ask questions she knew would not be answered. She simply went on with her work, humming softly songs her grandmother used to sing. Diego watched everything from afar, waiting for the moment when Teresa would give up too. But she didn't give up. In the second week, something almost imperceptible happened. Isabel, the oldest by 3 minutes, slightly turned her head when Teresa passed by carrying a bucket. It was such a subtle movement that Diego thought he had imagined it. Teresa noticed too. She didn't rush to hug the girl, didn't make a fuss. She just kept singing, a little louder this time. On the 10th day, Cecilia lifted her eyes when Teresa brought lunch. Amanda held a colored pencil that Teresa had casually left on the table. Livia wiggled her toes when she heard the gentle voice echoing down the hallway. They were tiny gestures, invisible to anyone who wasn't paying desperate attention. But Diego saw everything. And for the first time in more than a year, he felt something dangerous growing inside his chest: hope. Teresa never asked the girls anything. But she spoke to them as if they were capable of answering. "I'm going to make soup today, it's cold. Your doll fell under the bed, I left it right here. My daughter Helena loves to draw too." She treated their silence not as a wall, but as a language she was still learning to understand. And something in those broken children began, very slowly, to awaken. In the 3rd week, Isabel touched Teresa's hand. It was not an accident. It was deliberate, careful, as if she were testing whether that person was real or would disappear like smoke. Teresa did not move abruptly. She simply laced her fingers gently and whispered, "I'm here." Diego watched the scene hidden behind the door and had to hold back his tears. It had been so long since his daughters had sought human contact. The following days brought more transformations. Cecilia began to follow Teresa around the house, always a few steps behind, watching every movement. Amanda brought a crumpled drawing she had made weeks earlier and shyly placed it in Teresa's hands. Livia, the most withdrawn of all, smiled for the first time when Teresa sang a lullaby that seemed to come from another time. Teresa never rushed anything. She understood that those girls were like wounded birds. They needed to feel that they had wings again before trying to fly. She brought Helena to play with them, and the presence of another child, without judgment or expectations, created an unexpected bridge. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon that everything changed completely. Teresa was preparing cookies in the kitchen when she heard small, quick footsteps. She turned around and saw the 4 girls running toward her, something they had not done in more than a year. Their little faces were different, almost alive, with a brightness in their eyes that Diego had forgotten existed. Isabel arrived first and hugged Teresa's legs with desperate strength. The other 3 joined in, forming a tight circle of little arms and tears. And then Isabel spoke, with that small rusty voice of someone who had been silent for a very long time. "Mommy." The word echoed through the kitchen like thunder. Teresa froze. Helena stopped playing. And Diego, who had entered at that exact moment to get some water, felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The other 3 repeated it, one after the other, in a broken and desperate chorus. "Mommy. Mommy. Mommy." Teresa looked at Diego with wide eyes, full of panic and confusion. Diego felt the anger explode inside him like a dormant volcano. Not at Teresa, but at the cruel situation life had set up. His daughters were alive again, but living a lie. They were calling a woman they had known for less than a month their mother. "We need to talk. Now." His voice came out harsher than he intended. Teresa nodded, gently freed herself from the little arms clinging to her, and asked Helena to take the girls to the bedroom. Diego waited until they were alone in the kitchen before exploding. "They think you're their mother. Do you realize the problem with that? You're going to leave one day, like every employee does, and they'll break again. They'll break worse this time." Teresa took a deep breath, and he saw tears run down her brown face. "I never said I was their mother, Mr. Diego. I never lied. But you didn't correct them either. How could I?" Her voice trembled. They were dead inside. For the first time in months, they're feeling something. How do I destroy that? Diego ran his hands through his hair, desperate. He knew she was right. He knew those girls had finally found something safe to hold on to. But he also knew that illusions don't sustain anyone forever. "What do you really want?" he asked, looking straight into her eyes. "Because if it's just a job, you can leave now and I'll pay you 3 months in advance. But if you're going to stay, it has to be for real. Not as an employee. As someone who chooses to be here." Teresa wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I lost my mother when I was 7. I was raised by an aunt who made it clear every day that I was a burden. I know what it's like to have no one. I would never do that to these girls." "Then stay," Diego said, and for the first time in more than a year, his voice carried more than just pain. "Stay for real. You and Helena. Move in here. Become part of this family. But without lies. We'll tell them the truth in their way, in their time." Teresa covered her face and cried. The months that followed transformed that cold mansion into a real home. Teresa and Helena moved to the upper floor, and for the first time in more than a year, the house had life. Laughter echoed through the hallways, toys were scattered across the living room, the sound of children running barefoot over the marble floors. Diego and Teresa spoke to the girls with gentle honesty. They explained that the mommy who carried them in her belly could not stay, but that Teresa was there because she chose to be. The quadruplets were too young to fully understand, but they understood what mattered most. Teresa was not going to leave. With time, Isabel began to draw again. Cecilia learned to laugh out loud once more. Amanda started asking questions about everything, reclaiming the curiosity she had lost. Livia, the most wounded of all, took longer, but eventually began to call Teresa without hesitation, without fear. Diego watched it all with a heart divided between gratitude and something deeper he could not name. Teresa was not just someone who took care of the girls. She had saved them. She had entered that house as a cleaning woman and become the center that held everyone together. It was on a winter night, after the 5 children had fallen asleep, that Diego found Teresa in the kitchen drinking tea. He sat beside her in silence before whispering, "Thank you for staying." She smiled, tired. "Thank you for letting me." 2 years later, Diego and Teresa married in a simple ceremony in the garden of the house. The girls were flower girls, Helena carried the rings, and for the first time in a long while, Everyone smiled in a family photo. The story of Diego and Teresa was not about replacing what was lost. It was about building something new from broken pieces. It was about understanding that family is not only who brings you into the world, but who chooses to stay when the world falls apart. Years later, when someone asked the quadruplets about their mother, they spoke of Teresa without hesitation. Not because they forgot the truth, but because they learned that true love is a verb, not a noun. It is presence, not biology. And if you made it this far, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and tell us in the comments where you're watching this story from. Family is who stays.